It was media day for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and there wasn't a lack of storylines to talk about. I'll break down some of the important ones, including William Nylander looking to move back to center, at least through training camp. This is Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Leafs podcast, your daily fix for all things Leafs. I'm your host, David Morassutti from Sportsnet. As always, Locked On Leafs is a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast, so make sure you subscribe for free wherever you get your podcast from, and make sure you're subscribed on YouTube, Locked On Leafs. You'll be getting your content each and every day, 5 days a week. Yes, we are back to doing 5 shows a week after the offseason's over because we are now back to pretty much full-time hockey being back. And it started today with the Toronto Maple Leafs doing their first media sessions as kind of the one to kickstart training camp. They get all that media stuff out of the way. Now, then they'll focus on the on-ice sessions that will begin on Thursday. And, you know, this is a good chance to get some clarity on a few things. You get to hear from Brad Treliving, Sheldon Keefe. This is one of the main ones where they get to kind of go over the priorities for the season, especially from Brad Treliving. And I'll just get you caught up on some of the things you might have missed if you didn't already see it. Matt Murray. Basically, from the way it sounds like, don't expect to see Matt Murray this season. And it was interesting that Brad Treliving wouldn't really elaborate too much on what is going on with Matt Murray, other than that he's going to be getting surgery next week. For what? We don't know. He's keeping that kind of under wraps here. He said that's mainly to protect Matt Murray's privacy, which, hey, if that's something that Matt Murray wants, you have to respect that, okay? Not everything has to be disclosed. If that needs to get challenged, the NHLPA and the NHL will handle that if people feel like that's something that's a little fishy. But just from what Treliving did say, it was something that has been bothering him before, and some sort of issue that aggravated during the offseason. So we know that he was dealing with an ankle injury throughout the year, and that kept him out for a good amount of time. I don't think an ankle issue would be keeping him out for the whole season, so I wonder if there's something else going on that we don't really know about. And, of course, Jake Muzzin, no surprise here. He's not playing this season, and we didn't expect Jake Muzzin to be playing. It was pretty much made known that his career was tracking towards him not being able to get back onto the ice after the injuries that he has suffered, which is unfortunate. We know how much Jake Muzzin means to this blue line. This is not a case where I feel like the Leafs are trying to get rid of Jake Muzzin. It's just the way it all kind of played out. They would rather have Jake Muzzin healthy and playing for this team. I know I would be. So it's very unfortunate. Also, some more injury news. Bobby McMahon won't be starting camp with the team. He's going to be doing some work with the development team until he is ready to get back to playing with the normal camp group. There are 3 sort of groups at camp, as Brad Treliving explained. You got the main guys in camp 1 and 2. Third group in training camp is kind of the development. I'm sure there's going to be some people working back from injuries that aren't ready to be with the main camp. So just a little breakdown of how, for anybody that was watching, Brad Treliving was a little confused on what he meant by that. That's what he means. And also, Ty Voy and Braden Kressler were both injured during the prospect tournament, so they're hoping to get those guys up and running at some point during training camp. So that was kind of the injuries and news and notes from, the media part of the session there. A lot of people were asking about the transition with Kyle Dubas being gone, Brad Treliving coming in. We kind of heard the same sort of answers from everyone. But the one thing that got everybody talking was when Sheldon Keefe came out and said, we are going to be trying William Nylander at center this season. And we know the Leafs have tried this many times before in the past. And it actually, I saw the news pop up, and then on the Discord. If you're not on the Discord, I'll put the link so you guys can get a part of the Discord. And the Discord kind of is like, we've seen this before. We've seen the Leafs try Nylander at center before, and it hadn't really worked. True, it has not worked in the past. But here's why I think it's going to be different this time. Now, do I think it's going to work? I'm not sure because I don't know how exactly they're going to deploy this, right? Who his line mates are going to be. But everyone says, well, the Leafs have tried this before with Nylander and it hasn't really worked. The only time really the Leafs have tried William Nylander at center was out of necessity, right? And it was kind of a last minute thing. And Sheldon Keefe had to go up to Nylander and says, you okay if we do this? Because we don't really have many other options. It's with Austin Matthews being out, or if John Tavares was out of the lineup, or that one case in the playoffs where the Leafs decided we're going to do a Matthews, Marner, Tavares line. So Nylander has to play center because we have nobody else that can play top six center for this team. And those are kind of the only time I recall that Nylander has played center. And so why I think this is different this time is that there seems to be somewhat of a plan, maybe not the most concrete plan, but it seems like they're going to give this as much of a leeway as they have in the past. So I'm going to read exactly what Sheldon Keefe had to say. So Keefe had to say this: William is going to start at center in camp tomorrow. With that being the case, I have talked to Willie about it. Trey and I have talked a lot through the off seasons about it. So we already know that this is something they've talked about a lot. This isn't something they just decided to do. We know that moving from the wing, and this is Keefe again, moving from wing to center is a lot more difficult on the fly than moving from center to wing. Giving him some time and opportunity to grow into that position through camp and having experience and confidence to do so gives us a chance to see what it looks like, how it affects Willie's game, and how it affects our team and the flow of the team. And he thinks it's important to do so. Important to say that William Nylander is fully on board with this because, look, this is a contract year for William Nylander. There's a lot at stake for Nylander. He's not agreeing to play center if he doesn't think, well, first off, if he plays center and he does well, that does well for his contract negotiations. He's not doing this if he feels like it's not A, going to help the team, and B, going to help him in some way too. Nylander's, as Keefe said, fully comfortable playing center. He gets drafted as a center. We all remember he was drafted as a center, and I remember him playing center with the Toronto Marlies. And Sheldon Keefe has coached him playing center. So this isn't like new territory for them. Thing is, that was in the AHL. This is the NHL. And we don't know where exactly Nylander is going to slot in, right? Is he going to be the second line center? Is he going to be the third line center? Sheldon Keefe did say that the plan is for Nylander, Tavares, and Matthews to all play center. So this isn't a case where Nylander is playing center and Tavares is going to move to the wing, although they did discuss Tavares moving to the wing. And I wonder if Nylander playing center does so well that Tavares moves to the wing and that's how the line changes. We don't know yet. I think this is going to be something to watch throughout camp, how this really works. And we've already seen some lineup combinations right now. Who would be with Nylander in this case? I think I saw like some people put out Sam Lafferty and Yarncroke out, Cal Yarncroke with him. We don't really know for sure how that will go. I think that would be an interesting line, but I also wonder where the offense part of that'll be interesting too. So that's going to be obviously now the biggest storyline in training camp. It was the biggest storyline from the media session. So I'm very curious to see how that all plays out. We'll discuss more about that when we actually see who Nylander is going to be skating with. And obviously we'll get the first few games. The first preseason game is on Sunday. So we won't be able to know for sure until we see preseason games how it's all going to work out. But I think the important thing here from Sheldon Keefe, he believes that Nylander has the ability to do it if he's willing to put his mind towards doing it, right? And I think with the additions of Tyler Bertuzzi and Max Domi, and I know that Sheldon Keefe also mentioned Nick Robertson too. You have, Matthew Nyes, you have Kelly Yarncroke. The Leafs actually have an abundance of wingers that can all play in the NHL, right? Nick Robertson, we know the injury history, but you got a lot of wingers here. You don't have the center depth, really high-end center depth is the important thing here. So I think this is why they're trying Nylander at center. They probably want to maximize, having three lines that they can roll with, right? Because the bottom six, the drop off in talent was apparent throughout the years. It actually changed when you have Ryan O'Reilly playing third line center. Remember when they put O'Reilly on that second line with Marner, Tavares? It looked great because, the first game they do it, really, he scores a hat trick. But it was apparent that the Leafs were at their best when Ryan O'Reilly was a third line center and he had Matthew Nyes on one wing and Noel Acciari on the other side. Now, I understand Ryan O'Reilly is natural center. That's his position. He is defensively responsible. He is such a good centerman. Nylander is not O'Reilly in that case. Could he be? I can't really say for sure that's going to be the case with William Nylander, but I think when you saw the way they were able to roll three lines like that, it made the Leafs a tougher team to play against, especially against the Tampa Bay Lightning, who had such depth at center. And now you go up in throughout the year. This should make, if it all works out, it should make the Leafs a tougher team to play against, because you can't just say we're going to stop the top six and let the bottom six beat you. You have now three lines that you should hopefully have to worry about when you're going up against the Leafs. We'll see. We'll see how long that experiment lasts. If Sheldon Keefe will actually stick to his word and continue to roll out this lineup, we shall see. I think this feels a little bit different because Brad Treliving really pushed for it from what it looks like. And I think the fact they're doing it in training camp this is where you work on these things. This is where you do that experimentation. I think that's what makes this a little bit different in my opinion. So we'll see how it all works out. As you can see, Mike DeStefano is not with me, but he is going to be making an appearance on the show. We did pre-record some content before Mike went away. As you saw in the last episode, we did a part 1 of our player value ranking. So where players kind of rank in terms of their value for the Leafs. We did part 1 the day before. Now we're going to bring you part 2 of this series. It's a very fun thing that Mike and I did together. Some really good debates, I think. And, I saw that some of you were also, giving your thoughts on it as well. So here is part 2. And guess what? Part 2, Mike and I have probably the biggest debate that he and I have had on this podcast in a really long time. So I'm really looking forward to it. And I hope you guys enjoy it here on the other side of the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode of the Locked On Leafs podcast is brought to you by a product that I use every day, AG1 by Athletic Greens. Maybe you're like me, you want to be healthy and eat well, but it's always easier said than done. That's no longer the case with AG1. With one delicious scoop of AG1 in a glass of water each day, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, nervous system, immune system, energy, recovery, focus, aging, all those things that I listed. It can be hard and expensive to keep track of multiple different supplements and vitamins, not to mention how hard it can be on your stomach. AG1 costs you less than $3 a day. You're investing in your health, and it's cheaper than your cold brew habit. So if a comprehensive solution is what you need from your supplement routine, then try AG1 to get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. Go to drinkag1.com/NHL Network. That's drinkag1.com/NHL Network. Check it out.
Yeah. All right, next up, this is John Klingberg. I believe This is John Klingberg.
John Klingberg. I mean, he's paid to be an impactful NHLer, right? But I don't know if
I can't do it for John Klingberg as an impactful NHLer. Yeah. Can he be? Yes, he's done it before when he was young, when he was in Dallas. But it's been a couple of years since we've seen that John Klingberg. Like, last year was brutal with the Ducks and with the Wild. He's been a dash 28 in his last 2 seasons. Dash 28 in his final year in Dallas and a dash 28 last year with Anaheim. Got flipped at the deadline, played for Minnesota, was a +3 when he was in Mini. Did get 4 points in 4 playoff games, I might add. But I'm not exactly sold on this John Klingberg experiment. He's not particularly good at playing defense which is a bit of a problem in my opinion. And that again is why I think he lacks that impactful nature, because he's not a two-way guy. So I think role player is probably where he is going to be slotted at this point for me.
Yeah, and I don't think he was the Leafs' first choice. Like, we heard that they were sniffing around at a few defensemen before they kind of settled on John Klingberg. I think
Orlov part of the.
I think Ekman Larson was one when he was bought
Yeah.
up by the Canucks. I think Matt Dumba was another one that Ellie Friedman had talked about. I can't remember what other defense. I mean, Luke Shen was talked about, but
Yeah.
I mean, that again, he was viewed
Too much money.
So I think John Klinger was a little bit of a they needed a right shot, and his name was
gamble. It's a 1-year gamble.
1-year gamble.
We'll see what happens. All right, Sam Lafferty was brought in at the deadline. Played some decent hockey for the Maple Leafs, I would say. He was all right.
Slow start. It was a slow start to him, but then him and David Kampf became a really good duo, especially in the playoffs. But like
him, Kampf, and Zach Aston-Reese were actually a very good fourth line for this team.
Yeah.
They spent a lot of time in getting some tough minutes, starting out against some tough assignments against Tampa Bay, and so often they would end up in the offensive end, like against like Cirelli or against Point or against like Stamkos line. Like, they got tough assignments and often won them. That being said, like, Lafferty's still very much a depth player for this team. You know, I don't even know if he's going to be an every night NHLer for this club. Does have some versatility where he can play all three positions, and that's going to help him try and find a role with this team. But ultimately, he's a fourth line guy. You know, he can play on your third line if need be. He's got the speed and he's got, defensive awareness to do it. But if slotted properly as a fourth liner, as a depth guy, I think he could be a decent player for them. So I think depth players makes sense. Nicky Robertson, Nicky Bobby. Where are we going with Nick Robertson? Assuming he can stay healthy all season, what type of role do you expect him to play?
I think he's a role player. If he's an everyday NHLer, he's a role player to me.
Is he an everyday NHLer though?
That's the problem. He hasn't been able to show it, which is why I view him more in the depth column, because nobody's penciling him in. I guess probably that's why he should be a depth player at this point in time, because we can't put him into this lineup right now. If you look 100%. At a lot of depth charts people might have of the Leafs going into the season, if anyone has Nick Robertson on that depth chart, it's because they have a lot of belief in Nick Robertson and what he can do. Unfortunately, because he hasn't played, you can't.
And if he is on depth charts, where's he slotted?
I think at best he's on that third line left wing spot. Like, you can't put him in the top six, and
typically on the fourth line I've seen, right? Yeah, that's my point.
You can, yeah.
So depth player, I'm with you.
Yeah.
Timmy Liljegren. Timmy Lils. At one point last year, I legitimately thought Liljegren was going to work his way into the top four, and then they made a bunch of additions at the deadline, bringing in Luke Shen, bringing in Jake McCabe, and Liljegren was kind of in and out of the lineup a little bit as they were trying to, get Eric Gustafsson some minutes as well. Yeah, he's a guy for me. I don't know where to go with him. Like, I want to say he can be a role player for this squad, but I don't know if I'm ready to give him that type of responsibilities quite yet. You know what I mean? Or can you persuade me? Or do you think?
I just think that when he was, in a consistent situation, he played his role properly, right? Do I view him as a top four right now going through the year? Well, I mean, the addition of John Klingberg says no. They're going to put him in the top four, which means Timothy Liljegren right now is going to be on the third pairing, unless he proves to us that he can be a top four guy And I think that's his ceiling is second pairing defenseman, right? That's his ceiling. But the problem is we haven't seen it from him enough. And again, that's not all on him. I do think Sheldon Keefe has been he's the
timid
player.
to give him responsibility for sure.
Yeah. Right. So I want to put a role player for him, but I think right now he's more of depth because he might come out of the lineup, but they want to bring somebody else in, right? If they want to make a change in the lineup, Timothy Liljegren is probably the one coming out, especially on the right side. They're not taking out Brody. They're not taking out McCabe. They're not taking out Klingberg, depending on who's playing on the right side. I don't see any of them coming out. It's going to be Timothy Liljegren come out. So probably he should be a role player, but right now, I think based on where he is at this point of his time with the Leafs, I think he's probably a role player. And and to me, I want to see more from him.
Yeah. You put him where you believe he fits. I'm okay with either, but yeah, I lean slightly to depth as well. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The captain, John Tavares, is the next player we're going to slot here in one of the bins. John Tavares, paid like a franchise player. Typically, your franchise player wears the C. Is that the case for the Maple Leafs as we slot Gianni Toronto?
I personally still think yes. I know that his number.
Really?
I think so, yes, because right now the NHL is doing their media tour in Las Vegas. You know who's doing the rounds right now? It ain't Mitch Marner. It ain't Austin Matthews. It's John Tavares. And he's the captain. And he's paid like a franchise player. I understand the production.
You know who else is a captain? And you know who else is out parading himself at the media tours right now? Just named a captain this week. Last week. Adam Lowry.
Oh.
Just because you're a captain and just because you make a lot of money and just because you're willing to go to these NHL events and speak with media, I don't think that puts you in the franchise players category. He was a franchise player at one point. Absolutely. When he was with the Islanders and even like his first year in Toronto. But it's been a couple of years since we've seen that Tavares. I mean, this is back-to-back years now where he's gone like stretches, like big stretches, like 12 to 15 games without scoring a goal at 5-on-5. Like that's not a franchise player, if you ask me. Impactful for sure. I think for certain he's still an impactful NHLer. Like the guy's still basically a point per game. But if we're talking about the franchise guys being relied upon in all aspects, I don't know if I can put him on the same tier as Austin and Mitch. I think he's impactful. I don't know if he's a franchise guy anymore.
I'll just say this so we don't get caught saying we're comparing John Tavares and Adam Lowry. Tavares had 80 points. Adam Lowry's never had 80 points in his career.
I get that, and I'm being a little, facetious, but my point was more so like just because he's out there doing that and doing captain responsibilities doesn't mean he gets, stamped with a franchise player. You know what I mean?
I still think though the team somewhat gravitates towards him, not in the way maybe that Austin Matthews, but I still think he has sway.
I don't know how much I believe that, Dave.
I knew you and I were going to have disagreements with this one, though.
Who should be, if you were the coach, Dave, if you were the coach, who would you give the C to?
Right now?
Yeah.
I mean, we knew it. We all know it should have been Austin Matthews in the first place.
I disagree. I think it should have been Morgan Rielly.
Well, I mean, I wanted Morgan Rielly, but we already knew that it was going to be.
I'd still give it to Mo. I would still give it to Mo.
Yeah. I think he's the one that's a bit more of the mouthpiece of the team. That's for sure. But I just think that.
So who would be second? Who would be second in line after Mo? Then
look at the time that the captaincy was made. Who was the one when that decision was made? It was Shanahan.
Exactly.
It was Dubas and Babcock.
It was Babcock.
Yeah,
that was very much a Babcock.
And it's also because Tavares was the guy, right? They brought him home. He came in, had this really like really good season with the Leafs.
Yeah.
It
But
kind of means
he hasn't lived up to expectations, I think is what I'm getting at. And you can't be a franchise player and not live up to expectations. I mean, people in this market have talked about that deal being the crippling debilitation of this team and why they haven't been able to get to where they want to go because of that cap and because he can't quite live up to his cap, essentially. Like that's been declared as one of the most egregious contracts in the league at this point. I'm sorry, if you're a franchise player, I don't necessarily think that much negativity would be surrounding you.
well, I mean, there's negativity even with guys who do produce and are still paid a lot just because of how the team performs too. I will say that.
So what are we doing here? Are we flipping
I'll concede and put him
flipping a
as an
coin?
impactful player.
Okay.
Okay. I just
Let
think
us know in the comments below. Is John Tavares still a franchise player? Is he still a franchise guy for this team? Or at this point in his career, is he just a really good NHLer and an impactful NHLer who's going to do good things for this team and certainly makes this team better? But is he a franchise guy? That's where I want people to discuss in the comments down below.
We'll get back to finishing off the tiers rankings, but before we do, let me tell you about our other show sponsor for today, and that is our good friends over at Birddogs. Birddogs make you look good because they are stretch khaki shirts that are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg to give you a truly sculpted look. Birddog shorts do exactly the same thing as Lululemon, but fit way better. And they fit better than regular shirts that are made of stiff restricting cotton. They fix the issue by inventing cloud knit fabric that looks like khaki but stretches so you get a way slimmer fit without having to sacrifice movement. And Birddog uses an anti-sweat wicking fabric that keeps you cool and dry all day long. And they're great for every occasion. I usually like to use them when I'm going out golfing. Sometimes when I'm at the pool, they're just easy to throw on. They're such a versatile product. That's why I really do like them. And they give out free swag whenever you place an order. So I got the tumbler, the nice little Birddogs tumbler that I can use, especially for the cold and warm drinks. It's a great thing to have. So make sure you go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNHL or enter promo code LockedOnNHL at checkout for a free Birddogs water bottle with your order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnNHL for a free water bottle. You won't want to take your Birddogs off. We promise you.
Do you have a final comment you would like to make before we move on?
Nope, because I feel like this will be an hour long episode. I
think we're splicing this into a part 1 and a part 2. So at this point, probably a part 2 at this point if you're watching this. That's my guess is what we'll do with this one. Who is this guy?
Connor Timmins is the next guy.
Oh, Connor Timmins, right.
By the way, I know some people might say this. Jake McCabe is on here twice.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's my bad. I screwed up on that one.
But
I had someone else on there twice. I think I had Yarncroc on there twice earlier too, and I saw that and took him off, and I forgot about McCabe.
So the next one's Connor Timmins. There's no debate. Like he might not even make the roster. Like
I don't. Yeah, he's a depth player. It's literally what he's going to be. He'll be lucky if he can, play himself onto a third pair this season. So yeah, depth player. We don't even need to spend time talking about that one. Next up, Pontus Holmberg.
I mean the same thing too. Depth player. Like he's a guy that could be put down because of salary reasons.
I don't expect for him to make the team out of a camp strictly for contractual reasons. Similarly to how Nick Robertson didn't make the team at a camp last year, they're going to be in a cap crunch where they're not going to have healthy scratches. They're only going to be able to keep 20 guys on the roster, barring an injury, where they could use some IR help, I suppose. But if that's the case, he's one of the guys who doesn't need waivers to be sent down to the minors, and I fully expect for that to happen. So if he's not considered enough of a role player to keep in the lineup, he certainly belongs in the depth players category. Matthew Nyes is the next man that we got to discuss here. This will be a bit of an interesting one. Matthew Nyes had a terrific few games for the Maple Leafs prior to the injury. Where does Matthew Nyes belong in this tier list?
I want to put him in the impactful, but the thing is, I don't want to push that too far for him, because you can have a really good start to your NHL career and then things kind of ease off a little bit. But I think Matthew Nyes has the tools to be an impactful player. We saw it during the playoffs.
Yeah.
We saw it. I saw it when I watched him in the regular season. I think he's an impactful player. I know that there's going to be some questions of where he is going to fit exactly on this team, especially after the addition of Bertuzzi. But I think that they view him as, he is the top prospect, and I think he is kind of that guy that they've been looking for in this lineup, right? So that's why I have him as an impactful NHLer right now.
Is he? Yeah. Can he get to that? I think he can get to that, right? Like that's the hope, is he becomes an impactful NHLer. You're of the belief that it happens right away. Like he's going to step into the NHL this season and his first full year, and he's going to kind of take it by storm and kind of be that Matthew Boldy type guy who is maybe go out here and score yourself, between 20 and 30 goals and dig in the corners and be a physical presence, go to the front of the net. Like if that's what you are anticipating out of Matthew Nyes this year, because if that's what you're anticipating, then I can get on board with putting him in the impactful NHLers. I don't know if we're being homers and we're being very, very wishful in this, but I think I can get on board because I know it's a small sample size that we saw in the playoffs, but man, when he was playing a good team, that's a good Tampa team, really good Tampa team, and he was fantastic. Yeah. Right? He was great. He worked his way up to the top line before getting injured. I think I can get behind you with the impactful NHLers. I think I can get behind it.
He does things that the other guys don't do, right? Like he's willing to go into the corner. He's willing to go to the front of that, use his body and things like that. He was playing overtime in that game 6.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was on the, like that's an
on the ice when they scored.
Right? Like he's the one that's put into those situations because the coach knows he can have an impact, right? Like you don't get thrown into those situations if your coach doesn't have faith in you to do it, right? And when he was with Ryan O'Reilly, like that line was just dominant, right? Like, and then they eventually said, "Well, the other guys kind of need your help, so we're gonna move you up," right?
Yeah.
So that's why I have him there. I am actually really excited to see what Matthew Nyes can do this season. Now, am I putting a lot of pressure on the kid? I don't think I'm the only one that's going to be putting the pressure on him.
Welcome to Toronto, kid. Welcome to Toronto. Yeah. Impactful NHLer is where we're going to settle on for Matthew Nyes. Good luck, young fella. Good luck. Next up, we have, who is this fella? Why am I blanking? Is this Steves?
Yeah, I think this is Steves.
I believe this is Steves. Yeah, because McMahon's on the end. Yeah, this is Alex Steves. Depth player. Don't think we need to spend a whole lot of time deliberating between what Steves is. I think, he's a guy who's played a handful of games in the NHL. If injuries occur, he'll come up and play some more third, fourth line minutes, but nothing more than a depth player at this point in his career.
I think so, yeah.
Simon Benoit, the French defenseman, or Quebecian defenseman, French-Canadian, I suppose.
Canadian.
Same thing, right? Depth player, might make the team as a seventh defenseman, might be a Marlies, a top pair player for the Marlies who comes up through injury. But at this point, he's kind of on par and similar to Connor Timmins.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Calle Jarnkrok. Where are we putting that boy Calle, though?
I got to put him as role players.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's for what he's paid and what he did last year, I had no issue, right? I think he was, it was nice that he could go on the top line and produce. It was also good that he could be on the third line. And yeah, did he have some moments where he wasn't as impactful? Sure, yeah, there were, but I just think he's a guy that you can kind of plug into different spots, and he kind of fits this lineup for sure.
I've got a theory on Calle Jarnkrok, and it's not a relatively new theory. I guess it's more of a renewed theory that Jarnkrok is going to basically be the new Alex Kerfoot, the guy who can go up and down the lineup, the guy who's versatile to play all three forward positions. He's someone who can kill some penalties. He's someone who you can put on the second power play unit. But he's not going to be tremendously impactful in any of those, but he's going to play a significant depth role for this team, which is why I think role players is, perfect. Like he's the ideal role player that you want, right? Like a third liner who can go up and down your lineup and be a Swiss Army knife and play all different types of scenarios. And I think Jarnkrok, he had 20 goals last year. When played with Matthews, and like there was a time where it was like, hey, Jarnkrok might be worth sticking with Matthews for a while because they're actually playing well together. So I think that, yeah, role player is definitely an appropriate spot for him. Joseph, the brick wall. Where are we putting Joey Wall?
I mean, I think role player, right? Like that's his role is the backup, and you know what? Some believe that he should get more games than just like what a typical backup gets. I don't know if Samsonov can handle a huge workload, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, he played 40 something games this year.
Yeah, he didn't play 50. I don't think he got to 50. So like, and I don't think the Leafs want him to get to that number either because he's
42, played 42 games, so basically half of the season.
Right. They got 3 goalies this year. And they're not
well, one of them I expect, and by one of them I do mean actually I don't even think we have him on this list.
I was just about to also say that we are forgetting Martin Jones, and we know that he's a depth player.
Yeah, like Marty Jones.
He's brought in to make sure that Joseph Wall can solidify himself as the backup. The backup who will play probably, I would say, minimum 20-25. I say 25 games would be a fair.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's that. Assuming that both of these goalies stay healthy, I think 30 games is probably more likely, like a 30-50 split,
I think so.
Yeah. Blanking on who this guy is. Wow.
Is this Dylan Gambrell?
Dylan Gambrell. This is Dylan Gambrell. And considering that I blanked on who he was because he's a depth player. He's going to be a Toronto Marley for the most part and might get an opportunity to come up and play a fourth line role. It'd be a 13th forward. But it's a competitive group. So I'm not even sure how many NHL games he's really going to play with the Maple Leafs. So depth is certainly where he belongs. And that leads us to our final player that we're going to slot in one of these 4 bins here. And it's Bobby McMann. Bobby McMann. Again, depth player, I think is what's appropriate for Bobby McMann. Not guaranteed to make the team. But I'll say this, Bobby McMann is somebody who maybe does have a bit of a higher ceiling than some of these other guys. Like I think Bobby McMann could play his way into potentially a role player type of status. Like I think he could work his way into a third line type of role. He's got, the speed, the tenacity, and there's a little bit of offense. You saw that in the American League. He's like one of those guys who just developed through the system well that might be able to turn into a decent, top 9 forward in the NHL, a good role player. And I think that's kind of what Toronto is hoping for a couple of years now. The organization has spoken about how they need some of these young AHL Marlies guys to take that next step. And one of the names that Kyle Dubas, I know he's not here anymore, but one of the names that they consistently threw out there was Bobby McMann, even before he made his NHL debut last year. So they clearly see some good in him. They feel like he can be a contributor to this team. And I do think that he could potentially work his way into a role player at some point. But right now, considering he's not even guaranteed to make the team at a camp, again, roster constraint issues could cause him to be sent down to the American League. Depth players is where he's going to slot.
Yeah, like when he was in the I know injuries was an issue for him too last year, but when he was in the playoffs, like Bobby McMahon was the guy for that Marlies team. He had a hat trick in one of the games in the playoffs too.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you know, he's one of those players that you want to see push for a spot in camp, because then that means that the development system is working to some degree.
Yeah, he could have, like, I don't want to use this name because I don't know if he can get there, but like a Zach Hyman-ish development curve, right? Where it's just a guy who's going to work his ass off, doesn't have all the tools, but can get rewarded with production just based on how hard he works to be the player that he can be. And if he gets put in the right positions and in the right spots, and he's playing and getting some minutes, perhaps he could work his way into a top 9 role here with Toronto and get some work his way into a role player type of status. But for now, we will keep him as a depth player, and maybe we'll have to revisit this at the end of the season and kind of see, if we were right. Or some guys maybe were too high on, some guys maybe we were too low on. Like maybe we do see Liljegren take that next step, or perhaps we see Tavares turn the clock back and turn into a franchise player. Nothing would make Dave happier, I would imagine, than seeing that. But we'll see. We'll see how things shake out. This was fun, though. We're definitely going to have to make this a yearly thing, Dave.
Yeah, definitely. I think getting a good grasp of where the organization is and the players that they have, and like kind of how we view the players, I think it's important because when we talk about making deals and trades, it's kind of one of those things you talk about where you don't trade Austin Matthews because he's a franchise player, right? You don't get many of those cracks at the can with an Austin Matthews like player.
We left one guy off the list. I just realized right now.
Who do we leave off?
We didn't have TJ Brody on there.
Oh my goodness.
TJ Brody's an impactful NHLer.
Wow. Okay, you know what? Because you had Jake McCabe twice, and I'm wondering if TJ Brody was that guy you were.
Yep. I meant to grab Brody, and I accidentally grabbed Jake McCabe twice. That's definitely what happened. But yeah, Brody deserves to be an impactful NHLer for sure.
Yes. He's your top. He's likely, unless they make a trade or anything, he's your top pairing defenseman with Morgan Rielly. I think that's how it starts off. If it isn't, I would be very surprised.
That's likely how it starts off, and I mean, I'm sure we'll get some answers next week once camp starts off, or starts on technically Friday, is when things start. I don't know if we'll have lines and pairings in place by then. Typically, you do see a lot of shakeups, and they try different things in practice and whatnot. But maybe we'll get some answers or some clarity as to how Sheldon Keefe wants to deploy his unit this year, because it's a little different than last year. Certainly, way different than the playoffs, where there's been a lot of turnover since. So should be interesting. I'm excited though for the season. Excited for the first game coming up this weekend as well. But Dave, that'll do it for us here today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all podcasting platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on Twitter at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti, and follow the show as well at Locked On Leafs. Go ahead, smash that like button if you enjoyed this video. Let us know if you want us to do more tiered content like this, because it's fun having little debates and figuring things out. So let us know down below if you liked it with a comment and a like. But we'll be back with another episode. You'll be back with another episode tomorrow. Till then, keep locked right here on Locked On Leafs.